Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to thank BlogHer for including this panel. It's really important. It's incredibly impressive that they're socially aware enough to include eating disorders in this day all about food. So thank you so much. We're really glad to be here. Claire Misko is supposed to be here with us, and we don't know where she is. So we are hoping that everything is well with Claire, and we're going to have more of a fireside chat, Christina and I. So this is a little bit, we're winging it now because Claire is the CEO of NEDA, so we were really relying on her being part of this. But we'll be okay. So, okay, let me put on my glasses. So our hope for this panel is not only to educate about eating disorders, body shaming, and toxic diet culture, but also to shine a light on the dilemma facing content providers, both overtly and covertly, and the messaging and visuals designed to bring eyes to a post or a page. So I'm Ilene Fishman, and I have been practicing psychotherapy for 35 years. I have a general practice, and I specialize in the treatment of eating disorders. I'm passionate about empowering good psychotherapy, and I specialize in the treatment of eating disorders. And I myself am recovered, and I know for sure that people who have eating disorders can also achieve full recovery. So that's what brings me here today. And I want to introduce Christina Grasso.
Hello, I'm Chris. Oh,
go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christina Grasso. As Jen Denton said, I worked at Stylecaster for almost 2 years, I think. It's been a while, but it's a great place, so thanks for having me back, even though I left. And I work in beauty. My background is in fashion and beauty. I've worked in the industry for about 8 years now, and I also moved to New York a couple weeks after being discharged from an inpatient eating disorders program, so I just jumped right in. And since then, once I started talking about it, which was really hard for me, I realized that it really opened a lot of doors for me and helped a lot of other people too, so I decided to continue trying to be open about it. And then about a year ago, my good friend Ruthie Friedlander and I, she's a fashion editor and also in recovery, co-founded The Chain, which is a nonprofit that supports women in our industry struggling with eating disorders. So thank you for having me. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask the questions, and then Christina and I will answer them. Okay. In today's world, social media is playing a big role in diet culture and with eating disorders and also body image. What is happening in terms of this, and how as consumers should we be aware of it?
I think in this day and age, awareness is really key because anytime I talk to younger people about this topic, I kind of tell them when I was growing up, there were magazines and that kind of media, but social media was still far off. And I would look at these magazines as a fashion-obsessed child that I was and think I had no idea that retouching existed. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized the amount of production that goes into, the images that we see every day, and that also goes for a lot of social media. And so I always try to remind more impressionable people, or just even, I think it's a good reminder for all of us that social media can be just as produced as magazines, and I think that having the awareness of that can be really helpful and make us all feel a little bit better about ourselves, hopefully, and maybe not compare ourselves as much.
So I think that's the important takeaway, and you'll be hearing this in all of our questions about how much power social media has in terms of eating disorders, how vulnerable people are, and how much people are looking to social media for ways to feel better about themselves. So it has the power to do that, and it also has the power to make people feel worse about themselves. And the more we can understand that with our social media content, the more helpful we can be and hopefully do less harm. Acknowledging that a goal for social media platform is to increase traffic and views, and that the popular promotion of diet and fitness trends can also be part of the problem, how do we balance our drive for success in a competitive environment with a responsible approach to content?
That's a tricky thing as someone who has a background in editorial as well. I know, that there's a certain SEO value to something like how to look thinner by tonight, and that will always outperform something that says, for instance, how to feel better for tonight. And that's definitely something that I've kind of felt tension with because, obviously you want to meet traffic goals and all these things and expectations that your job has for you, but you also, or at least I want to have editorial responsibility and be sensitive of what might potentially be triggering to someone else. So I think that it comes down to you can really take a headline or content and tweak it so that it's not like how to look thinner by tonight, but you can make it like how to find a bathing suit if you have broad shoulders, or something that doesn't, it's specific enough that it'll still do really well in terms of traffic, but you're not kind of exacerbating this very long-held ideal that is nothing but harmful for women and men.
Absolutely. And this morning, someone, in fact, was it Raylan Greenberg was here, and she talked about how she put something up on her site about how to lose weight quickly, and then she got a whole bunch of pushback, and she not only took it down, but also apologized to her audience and her following, which I was really impressed about. Diets don't work. The reason the diet industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry is because we have to keep buying diets because we think that the next diet is going to work or the next fitness trend is going to work. So the more we can understand that, the more we know that putting that up, yeah, it's going to bring eyes to our site, but it's also going to be part of the problem, and it's going to be part of what is really encouraging eating disorders. Either some people certainly exacerbating eating disorders, maybe not causing eating disorders, but exacerbating the problem.
For sure.
How is social media potentially exacerbating issues about eating disorders?
Well, I think, like you said, there's no, social media in and of itself doesn't cause eating disorders. We, still don't know what causes them exactly, and it's not, it's all these things that just kind of feed into it. So, I know anecdotally, I kind of had the temperament of someone that would develop an eating disorder, whether I liked it or not. I was just in this perfect storm, and as someone who was very into dance and gymnastics and fashion, it just kind of all turned into this perfect tornado, and I got caught in the middle of it. So I think it's just another thing that just feeds into the mind of someone who's already vulnerable to these issues. And we're seeing more and more that they're becoming more prevalent. And I don't know if that's because they're being reported more frequently or they're happening more frequently, but it's definitely a large-scale issue. And I think it's kind of on us to do every little bit we can to be more sensitive to one another.
We don't know what causes eating disorders. There's a lot of discussion in our field and disagreement in our field, actually, about what causes eating disorders. But when people ask me what causes eating disorders, my answer is always the same: low self-esteem. So whether there are biological issues that make us more vulnerable to developing anorexia nervosa or any of the range of eating disorders, there are usually also environmental factors that impact us and have impact the way we feel about ourselves. And again, that's where social media comes in, because you have so much power about influencing how people feel about themselves, how young girls feel about themselves, how women, because women are taught forever that our value is in how we appear and about our weight, unfortunately. So the more that we can counteract those really toxic messages, the toxic messages of diet culture and body shaming, the further ahead we really are in terms of making important progress. There's a widely held misconception, Christina, that eating disorders look a certain way. For example, they always present in a very thin body, when the majority of those who struggle are actually at an appropriate weight for their height or even overweight. How is this misconception harmful?
I mean, I personally, throughout my struggle, I'm 30 now, and I started struggling when I was 12. So the past 10, I've been in some form of treatment for the past 10 years, in and out of the hospital several times. And, it didn't matter what my weight was. I was still mentally always pretty much the same. And any time that I would be in treatment, it would be in a group of people that really just looked like a microcosm of general society, and everyone there thought they were too big to be there, because that's kind of, as a society, we really only see the extremes, because that's, again, what drives traffic and what, sells magazines and all of that, when the reality is everyone struggles just looks like a person. I mean, it's actually kind of rare to see someone who's emaciated. And that's the exception rather than the rule. And it wasn't until very recently that even in medical communities started recognizing that, oh, you don't have to be underweight to have anorexia. You could be any weight. And they actually took that out of the DSM. You don't have to be underweight anymore to warrant a diagnosis of anorexia. So it's really important for people to know, because on social media, one of the questions I get a lot is, am I too big to have an eating disorder? And that always breaks my heart, because it's like, absolutely not. Like, there's no look, size, anything to these illnesses.
Yes, people unfortunately feel that the only legitimate eating disorder is anorexia nervosa, and the only legitimate form of anorexia nervosa is to be really, really skinny. And historically, to be really, really skinny and really, really white, and to be really, really white and really, really like upper middle class. And we now know that that's just so not true, that eating disorders cross the spectrum and include, all body sizes, and that it's not just about anorexia nervosa, and it's not just about white girls, and it's not just about white boys. It's about, across the range of sexual orientation, about, racial diversity, and eating disorders are just as diverse as the entire population is. Let's talk about orthorexia, Christina, because it's an increasingly common eating disorder. And let's talk about what orthorexia is, and how the role of social media is impacting it, and sometimes the dangers about what can be potentially masked by certain behaviors on social media.
I mean, I think...
First, define orthorexia.
Yeah, I think,
Want me to? Okay, orthorexia is about clean eating. And this is huge right now, right? Because I don't have an eating disorder. I'm just a really healthy eater. I'm just an organic eater. I'm just eating what's healthy for me, aren't I? Carbs are really bad, and gluten is really bad, and sugar is really bad, and, vegan is really good. And so it tells us that we're supposed to eat a certain way in order to feel good about ourselves. And that can be just as much of a severe eating disorder as all the others. Go ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's, you see it a lot on social media and the internet, people talking about eating clean. And as someone, I've been on both sides, but as someone with the eating disorder, the word clean has a lot of implications.
Clean.
And for the person with the eating disorder, it can feel like I'm dirty, I need to get rid of it, like these terrible compulsions. And it can get really dangerous. It can be just as deadly as any other eating disorder, but it's completely under-recognized.
Right, it's masked. So it's important for everyone to be aware of that, because again, so often people don't identify orthorexia as, an eating disorder and a serious one. Same thing with fitness, right? People overexercise all the time. It's pathological, but they're just being healthy. So it's important to be aware of that, because again, we're being sold all the time that we're supposed to exercise more, we're supposed to eat less, we're supposed to eat cleaner.
But I do agree that, there is value to, being healthy. It's just, at what point is it taken too far that you're, it's impacting your quality of life. So
absolutely. Absolutely. How much people are thinking about, sometimes that's one way that you can know if someone really has an eating disorder, how much time and energy and psychic energy someone is spending thinking about food and diet. And, the reason we think about food all the time is because we're hungry. If we're eating enough, we're not really thinking about food. We're not even that interested in food. Well, I shouldn't say that here, I guess, because some of us are interested in food all the time. But, biologically, when we're undereating is when we become more obsessive about food, usually. Okay, I have lots of questions. I'm trying to decide which ones we should focus on. Christina, you started the chain. Can you share more about this platform and what inspired you to start it and how it is impacting women?
Yeah, so I as I said, I've worked in the fashion and beauty industry for many years, and when I first moved here, I was 22, fresh out of college, and had the opportunity to tell my story on a larger online publication. And I really struggled with that as someone who hadn't been open about it in the past, at least not in a public way. And I ultimately went forward with it, and I was afraid that people would judge me. I would never get a job, like all of these things. And what happened was I received this outpouring of support and other people who came forward and been like, I mean, you know, Me Too means something else now, but basically, you know, Me Too. And I, you know, through the years really saw the value in community support in recovering from an eating disorder, and how big of a problem it was in the fashion industry, not just with models, but everyone else, editors, photographers, you know, everyone. It wasn't being addressed in any sort of constructive way. So I met my friend Ruthie about 2 years ago. She had just finished treatment and wrote about her own struggle, I think on InStyle, and I saw it, and I didn't know her personally at the time, but I just sent her a DM like, hey, I think that's amazing, like, I'm here for you if you need it. And we quickly became friends and wanted to extend that same support to other women in our industry who also struggle. So we started the chain about a year and a half ago. The name was inspired by the Fleetwood Mac song, as I am a big fan. And since then, we hold monthly meetups, and we also do open events for the community to kind of educate on things like editorial responsibility, responsible media coverage, how to help a friend, how to help we'll bring in outside experts, and we're really just trying to address the issue head on in a positive, constructive way. So.
Thank you. I'm going to jump to the last question because I think this wraps up a lot of all the other questions. It's a long question, but self-esteem often is tied to the misguided idea that if you are thinner or tanner or fitter or a cleaner eater, you will be happier and more successful in your life. In understanding this, how can we then ensure that we are blowing up those false promises and manipulative, misleading myths, and instead providing empowering messaging around a healthy relationship with our bodies and ourselves?
I think personally I'm still kind of figuring all this out and what it means to me, and, you know, throw in having to feel like I have a small platform of my own, and feeling that responsibility is tricky. But what it comes down to me is, am I being honest, and am I leaving this space better than how I found it? And for me, that looks like, you know, with all the DMs I get, I try to respond to all of them and really try to help people along the way, because I know that when I was younger, that's what I needed. So I really try to be that person that I needed when I was younger and struggling and afraid to tell anyone. So.
And I think we all have to risk putting out positive content, and again, not going sort of the cheap route and putting out content that we know is going to bring eyes to our sites and our platforms, but really doing the right thing. And you know, eating disorders don't help people feel better about themselves, and it's all about relationship with self. It's all about self-esteem. It's all about authenticity, which people talked about here today as well, and I was really happy to hear that. It's all about, again, healthy relationship with self, and that's what we want to try to be supporting in what we put out on our social media. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to say before maybe we have a minute we can open up for a question or an answer or two. Anything else you want to add that we didn't get to?
I don't have anything else to add, but I'm willing to answer a 1 minute long question, unless they will let us stay long.
Anybody have a question? Yes.
Hi, so Ilene, this kind of just bounces off of the last statement that you made, like the responsibility that we have as content creators. So I'm actually a contributing wellness blogger for a popular fitness activewear brand, and a lot of the pushback that I get on the content that I want to produce, which is very authentic to me, is it gets a lot of bounce back, because it's not, like you said earlier, Christina, you mentioned like how to look better by tonight is going to get more attention than how to feel better by tonight. So, like, do you have any strategies or tips of how we can?
Because that doesn't sell. That's the problem. So what sells is like the pathological message, the false message, and the misleading message. And the disordered messages, really, that's what sells. So I think we have to take risks around, and I think it's hard, position you're in, you're right, you're getting pushback, you want to be successful in what you're doing. So how do you balance that? And does anybody else have any ideas? Christina, do you have ideas? Anybody else have any ideas? Because we have to support one another in being able to really improve this stuff. Come on, somebody has to have a good idea. Yes.
I was the fitness editor at cosmopolitan.com for quite a while, and so I face this all the time, the desire to look better versus the desire to do no harm, and stop perpetuating that cycle of this specific body type being the ideal. So one of the strategies that I used that seemed to resonate was just focusing on strength building as opposed to like looking better, and that just tended to feel more empowering.
It can, but then it's all about all muscle, no body fat, and then it's about, so
Not necessarily.
You're right. It doesn't have to be. You're absolutely right. But I think just as long as people are aware that that's a better message. But it's like eating disorders are insidious. So the way eating disorders work and the way people think, the more you can be aware of that. Again, the insidious underlying stuff, the more you can try to counteract that with your platforms. So.
And really, I mean, nobody's perfect. I think as long as we're doing our best and aware of what we're doing, personally, that's what I would love to see. So.
Yeah, the world is changing in this way too. So hopefully, eating disorders will start to decrease rather than increase. We hope. Thank you all.
Thank you.